The monolingual transition is a language learning technique where you transition from using a regular dictionary to a monolingual dictionary, right? And a monolingual dictionary is a dictionary in which both the word and the definition are in the same language, right? So if you're learning Vietnamese, then that would mean that the word that you look up, you're looking up a Vietnamese word that you don't know, and the definition of that word is also going to be in Vietnamese, right? So you can see how something like this is incredibly difficult, right? And so why do people actually do this, right? Like, what are the benefits of doing this? I personally have gone through the monolingual transition in Vietnamese. I did this about maybe 7-ish months ago, and I got to the point where about 9 out of every 10 definitions I could understand, or at least pretty confidently grasp the main meaning of, right? There would often be times when a definition here or there would have an unknown word, but for the most part, I could understand almost every word that I looked up, right? And this process taught me a lot. And the main thing that it taught me was that it taught me how to understand concept explanations in Vietnamese. And I think this is like the main benefit, right? You really learn how to explain concept in the language, and you learn how to understand complicated explanations in the language, because the way that you define words, really what it is it's just an explanation. And I found like a lot of crossover where, like, if I'm watching a show and a character is explaining this really complicated set of instructions to another character, and I found that like the same kind of structures and things that were used in the dictionary are used in that scenario. Now, obviously, like a lot of the dictionary vocabulary that you use is not applicable to like spoken language that much, right? And I'll explain that later on in the video. But overall, I've noticed that a huge boost in my ability to comprehend like complicated instructions and explanations in the target language. And another thing that I noticed was that I really was able to get a deeper understanding of Vietnamese. Like, I could feel like I just understood the way that Vietnamese worked, and I internalized the patterns and the grammar and the way people talked so much better when I was getting definitions of the words in the language. You kind of get to know how the language describes itself, and it's super interesting, right? And I feel like if you've never had anything like this and you've entirely been using just like English equivalents when you're studying a language, you're missing out on a lot and you're leaving a lot on the table, because there's so much more nuance that you'll realize when you start doing like either a monolingual transition or some of the other options that I mentioned later. And you realize that oftentimes you end up seeing your target language through an English lens. And the monolingual transition is another way to kind of like infiltrate the language and see it as it really is without the English lens, right? So that was super helpful to me. Another thing that I noticed as a result of going through the monolingual transition was just insane vocabulary growth. So what I would do is I would find the word that I didn't know. I would look it up in a monolingual dictionary, and then there would be a couple words in the definition that I didn't know, and then I would look up those words in the monolingual dictionary, and I would keep going down this rabbit hole, right? And then sometimes I'd cut it off early and just look up a word in the bilingual dictionary and boom, cut it off. But sometimes I would literally keep tunneling. And what happens when you tunnel like that is that you begin recursively re-adding those words, right? So I'm using like a flashcard deck that I would add it to, right? And so you would get like a ton of repetition, because when you recursively add words like that, when you go back to the top, back to my original word that I didn't know that had 3 unknown words, when I look at that definition, I'm getting reminded of those 3 words that I didn't know prior, right? So it's like spaced repetition within spaced repetition. If you get like what I mean here, if you don't get what I'm talking about here, don't worry, I'm going to make a whole video on how to do the monolingual transition next week, and you'll be able to see that. Basically, you get a ton of repetition, you get this rapidly accelerated vocabulary growth. And I guess the biggest part of it is being able to understand how the language describes itself and getting that deep layer of understanding of the language, which transfers into all domains, right? Like, it goes beyond just like reading the dictionary. It like helps you understand shows better, helps you even hear auditory explanations better, even though like with the dictionary you're reading, right? So that's huge. But there are drawbacks to doing a technique like this. The first one is that you end up learning a larger proportion of useless words, right? Like, obviously no word is like completely useless, but a lot of the times, like, okay, even if you're not even doing the monolingual transition, if you're just watching from like slice of life content, a very small portion of the words that you learn, I guess like the more advanced you are, the more the portion is, but even from the very beginning, a very small portion of the words that you learn are going to be useless. Like, they're going to be like a character just said it one time, but like no, it's the type of thing like nobody says that, or it's like such a rare word that you just happen to look up and add to your deck that like nobody uses, right? So there's always a small portion of words that you learn that are going to be like obsolete, and you're going to like forget about them naturally. But with monolingual transition, there's a larger portion, right? Whatever that portion initially was, if you're doing the monolingual transition, it's going to be larger, because dictionaries often tend to use very literary terms when they describe things, and terms that specifically terms that people like don't use that often like when they speak. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then finally, like if your main goal is spoken fluency, even though I said that there is benefits that carry over, your time is better spent elsewhere, not doing this. Like even if like there is benefits to like a lot of benefits to doing the monolingual transition, it takes so much time and energy and effort that if you had put that time, energy, and effort into listening and repeating sentences and grinding those rather than like looking up dictionary words, you would be so much better at what is your main goal. So if your main goal is like reading comprehension, then I would highly recommend this. This is like almost like a rite of passage in a way, right? You really should do this. But if your main goal is like speaking and listening comprehension, then again, your time is better spent elsewhere. And you can maybe do this in the future once you're already fluent in the spoken language and you kind of want to level up your game even more. Now, the biggest reason why I wanted to make this video is to talk about the effect of AI on the monolingual transition. People, like specifically language learners, less and less are relying on dictionaries and more are relying on AI to teach them words, because AI can explain words to you in a way that a dictionary simply cannot. Like it can take context into account, it can dumb down the explanations for you, it can do everything a dictionary can do, but just infinitely better. So I'd say at this point, if you want to do like the monolingual transition type of thing, it's way better to do it with AI than with an actual dictionary like what I did, right? Like what you do is just tell ChatGPT, like whenever I ask you to define a word, define it in whatever your target language is, right? And then if you find the explanations to be too hard, like containing too many unknown words, tell it to simplify itself, right? And have it adjust to your level, right? To where like if you find the explanations a little bit too easy, you can tell it to use more natural definitions, right? And then keep going. That way your level is scaling up and you're getting better and better at understanding the words. And you can even tell it in order to solve like the useless words problem, you can even tell it like, hey, can you use words that only like people use, only like the spoken language, or like the most common 2,000 words when you're defining this word, for example, and it will do that. So that's super helpful when you're doing the monolingual transition. And to even solve the problem about like speaking and listening, so what I would do if speaking and listening is your main goal is take your ChatGPT generated definition, put it in like some kind of TTS, whether that be 11 Labs or like whatever kind of TTS you want to use that's good for your language. Have it speak that monolingual definition and then put the audio on the back of your cards. I personally don't do this because I don't really use my definitions, because I learn my words outside of Anki. And then when I put them into Anki, I already know them. So I'm kind of just reviewing them. And the definition is really only there as like a last resort. So I don't want to go through all that effort. I just have my definitions auto-generated in English if I really need them. But if you do use definitions when you flip through your Anki cards, then having them in your target language is just really good, because it gets you in that mood of thinking in your target language. Like I've talked about this a lot, right? Like when you switch to reading English text and then back to your target language and back and forth, you don't really get in that flow state of thinking in your target language. But if both your card and your definition are in the target language, now you're able to think in your target language the entire time you're reviewing cards. Your review process is just 100% input as well. So you're getting input and doing Anki at the same time. It's kind of like perfect, right? So I would highly recommend trying that with AI if you have not already tried it. Or if you want to go the old school dictionary route, you can totally do that. It's up to you. I would just recommend only doing it the old school dictionary route if your main goal is reading. All right, that's about it. Thank you for listening.